A number of friends just said, hey, you don't have enough time.
Do you see these mountains? So last year I tried to scale 4 14ers on a trip and I couldn't even get one. I was too weak.
We wanted to make a decision about whether or not to go to France last December, and then I found out that I had some issues potentially with my liver. And we had to go through quite a process, and finally, shortly before the month of April, we had clearance to go to France.
And when Martina and I were looking at what's the best possible transition strategy for our children, we decided the best scenario would be for our children to start school with the other children in France at the beginning of the school year on September 4th. So walk that back. That means we'd like to be in France by probably July, find a place to live, get them enrolled in school. That means we want to be in Quebec by probably mid to late June in order to finish off things with our house, connect with churches there, which means we need to have everything in place before then. You just don't have enough time. You don't have enough time. Not enough time. There's not enough time. And you're right. We don't have enough time. Unless God intervenes in some incredible way, there's not enough time. Will God intervene? Will there be some kind of divine intervention? That's the question. There are 5 obstacles for us to go to France. The house in Quebec, Canadian taxes, the prayer team's visas, and number 5, finances. That includes one-time outgoing expenses as well as recurring monthly donations. If these 5 things don't happen, then we don't go to France, and that's just a reality. Well, there's this couple. I met them years ago at a church that I spoke at. I've spoken at several times over the last 15 years or so, including in the youth group. And they helped out in the youth group, and they were probably in their mid-20s. I don't know exactly when I first met them. And just a great couple, a couple that I would love to go on vacation with. I'd love to hang out with if I ever had the opportunity. But as you know, life is, there are literally dozens of people, if not more, around the world that if I had the chance, I would go and spend a couple weeks of vacation with just to get to know each other. But God hasn't given us that opportunity up to this point. Well, they moved away from the church and from that region. And so when I would go and visit that church, they weren't there. We were still connected on Facebook, but we really didn't interact very much just because of life, and they were thousands of miles away, and that's what happened. Well, apparently they've been following our process, through cancer and coming back to Colorado and trying to go to France and all of this, and they've been praying for us. Well, we haven't connected, this couple and I, we haven't connected in years. Not because we don't want to, it's just that they're thousands of miles away from us, and we just haven't. A couple of weeks ago, I get an email, and this email says, hey Rob, we've been following you guys, and we're excited about walking through this process, and we want to give a significant amount of money to the outgoing expenses to go to France. Well, I was blown away. I was blown away by God's shocking generosity completely out of the blue. Well, I got another email from them, and it said, hey Rob, I want to talk to you on the phone. It was the guy, and so we talked the following day in the evening, and he had a story to tell me. He and his wife, they were in agreement that this outgoing expense that we have, which is at least $29,000, the amount that we worked out with World Venture Leadership. This goes to plane tickets and visas and moving and setting up a house and vehicle and all these kinds of things. And he tells me how he and his wife, they were happy to be a part of this. They wanted to give towards this $29,000 amount. Well, that night, he said it was as if God brought him under an incredible, intense amount of conviction. And so as he was laying there and he was fighting with God over this piece, he began to realize that here's the scenario. So he was planning, I think they're in their mid to late 30s today. He was planning to quit his job and begin a new business. And what he was fighting with God about was that if they gave more than the amount they were intended to give, then he would have to wait at least a few months longer to quit his job and start this new business. And I asked him, and I said, the amounts that we're talking about, these are significant amounts of money. Is this going to be something that is going to put your family in a precarious financial situation? And on the phone he said, no, Rob. God has been more than abundantly generous with us. And he said that was the ridiculousness of the fight that he was having with God. Because he knew that the only kind of consequence for them would be that he would have to wait a couple more months before he quit and started his new company. Well, apparently another thing he said is that he and his wife, again, they're these conservative, scientific kinds of people, but he said every once in a while, God speaks to them through dreams. And so he'll tell them things, specifically spiritual warfare kinds of things. And he said he's been really skeptical of that a lot of times, but at the same time, sometimes God says things and then they'll go and pray for somebody and find something out that just blows his mind. And so he was fighting about this and then finally woke up around midnight. Well, his wife, she had a dream about the exact same thing. And here's the thing. They were both convinced that God wanted them to pay the entire $29,000 amount. And so he was having this conviction, she was having this dream. They told each other about it, they talked about it, they prayed together. That's when he emailed me and said he wanted to talk to me on the phone. He said they're really happy to be involved. They want to see a French-speaking gospel movement. They want to invest in what's happening. They want all of these things. They were worried that if they give all this, then other people who were excited to give maybe wouldn't and all of this, but whatever. He said none of that really matters. He realized that the fundamental question for him that night was whether or not he was willing to obey Jesus and say yes to Jesus. That was the fundamental question. When he finally decided, yes, Jesus, yes, I will. If you want me to give $29,000 to whatever, I will. And obviously he's doing it in a responsible way as well, but to obey Jesus, and he and his wife are unified in this. This is incredible. How do you explain things like this? I had not spoken with this couple or connected with them in literally years. And out of the blue, this happens. I mean, I've taken, fundraising courses and classes and how do you do this and present and whatever. And this was never part of the class. Well, don't talk to somebody for years and then have them come under conviction and then have a dream and then email you from thousands of miles away and then like that. What kind of, fundraising strategy is that? I never could have dreamt this thing up. And so what does this mean? There are people, I've had the opportunity to share this with a number of different people, and they've said, wow, you must be on the right track. God must want you in France. It's clear, because when you're in God's will, then He opens doors like this for you. Now be careful. I wouldn't go there. What I will say is that in order for us to get to France in the condensed timetable that we're looking at, and then in order to see lives transformed by Jesus one after another, it requires divine intervention. And here is a case of divine intervention. But I think the lesson to take away from this is that this belongs to God. It doesn't belong to us. This is not our mission. This is not our thing. This is God's thing. He will intervene when He wants and how He wants, and what He wants from us is like what my friend said. God wanted him to be willing to say, yes, Jesus, I will obey you. God's will throughout Scripture is almost always spoken of as His revealed will, not a hidden will that we have to try to discover. No, God's will is clear throughout Scripture. His will is things like loving our neighbor, being filled with the Spirit, not committing adultery, not lying, loving God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, etc. These things are God's will. And if our heart is disposed to obey and love Jesus each day, we will be in the middle of God's will. Now, what does that look like on a practical level? Well, that could look like a $29,000 out of the blue check. It could also look like getting cancer. Either one of these or both of these could be right in the middle, circumstantially, of being in the middle of God's will of making disciples, loving God, loving my neighbor, etc. And so does God absolutely want us to be in France? We'll see. We're going to move forward because we know that He can make these 5 obstacles fall down. We can go over them, just like these mountains behind me that can be summited. These 5 obstacles can be summited with God bringing us up there through the power of His Spirit. What I don't want to do is I do not want to presume on God. God may have something else planned that we just aren't seeing. But what we're going to do today is we are going to obey Jesus today. We can do so knowing that the God of the universe, who created the heavens and the earth and all that is in them, can take care of the resource part. He can transform hearts, navigate us through governmental, bureaucratic issues, and we will go forward knowing that He can. Are you ready to step out and obey Jesus today? Stepping out knowing that God can and does move. That is the challenge. There are 3 things left. Taking care of the house in Quebec, visas, and then we still need about $1,200 in monthly commitments, and we're gonna see God do some incredible things.